Thank you. Welcome, everyone. You've got the fun slot of the day. We made it. We made it, and more importantly, Sally made it because she's just come from a New York red-eye flight. So, yes. Woof, you're here. I'm so happy, and thank you.
Barnes.
From America to Barnes, where we all, you know, the perfect journey. Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks for getting a ticket. Thanks for coming to Barnes to this beautiful fair. This is my patch. So much so that I was at nursery school downstairs. This is how much of a, and my mum, who's over there in the crowd, was the cookery teacher at this, so this is a very familiar place. Strange, my little 3-year-old ghost is sort of running around here. Today is going to be just a really sweet, fun, joyful, happy, interesting chat with the incredible Sali Hughes. I feel like there should be a CB or OBA after that. Sally is not only an incredible sort of perfume describer and inspirer, but you're an author, you're a podcaster, you are an award-winning journalist, you are the co-founder of the most incredible charity, which I'm going to talk a little bit about later, but it's really special to partner up with the Beauty Banks, which is Sally's charity, at the Barnes Fragrance Fair, and we'll talk about a little bit about that later, but that's really special to us that we can extend all of this amazing presence of people who love perfume and connect it to your beautiful charity. We're going to have a little deep dive, roller coaster back in time, look back into Sally's life in perfume and the moments and the fragrances that have really marked special times in her career and her personal life. And there'll be time for questions later. And really, this is the sort of chat we do all the time. And I wish there was a big cold Aperol in front of us, because I think maybe that's the...
Normally there would be cheese.
Cheese and lots of icy booze in some way, freezing cold champagne, 4 degrees. So there will be time for questions later. I'll make sure that I leave a little slot, because I know everyone gets cross when there isn't time. So I will speed up and get Sally speaking, because you're here to see her. Someone's having a good time outside. I think what I really want to do is take you back to tiny Sally, little Sally days, and how, if you could explain to us what your first experience was of meeting perfume, and if it was something that excited you and why you think it excited you.
I think I was always very aware of it. My mother always wore fragrance. My grandmother always wore fragrance. She wore Yardley's English Lavender, which I still love so much. And my stepfather always wore fragrance. It was always around. My first encounter with it was I decided to make my own in the toilet. So my mother had Biba cologne. Remember Biba? My mother had a Biba cologne, which was in this amazing kind of black Art Nouveau bottle. And I poured that and some Paco Rabanne, and that was my stepfather's, and like some bleach or something, and poured it into the toilet in my mother's flat. My mother left when I was very young, and she lived in a flat with my stepfather. And I poured all these fragrances in the toilet and then stirred them with a wooden spoon. And my mother... Not a violent woman, but I got properly smacked. Like, I got really smacked, like, over the lap.
Oof, yeah.
Like, yeah, it was awful. Then the first fragrance that I owned is a really vivid memory. I think I was about 11. My mother and my auntie Ursula, who was my favourite auntie, but not my auntie, you know, like your mum's friend who's your auntie. Yeah. Auntie Ursula, who was my favourite, and my mum went on a booze cruise to Calais, and they went on a P&O ferry, and they came back, and my mother, who was good at presents, handed me this little houndstooth bag from Dior, and it had the Dior oval and the Dior logo, and in it was a bottle of Miss Dior eau de toilette, which, if you think about it, I mean, 11 is young to get your first fragrance anyway, but Miss Dior is quite
And it's not the one you smell today, it's a very different,
no, so
a very different
Original one. Is an approximation of the one I'm talking about, would you say? I mean, if you go and have a sniff of Miss Dior Original, it's basically that. It's not as good, but it's basically that. It's a chypre, it's really... I mean, it's what my husband refers to sometimes as, you'll like that, Shoes, it's a cruel chypre.
Yeah.
it's a slightly kind of, edgy, sort of medicinal sort of a fragrance. Really grown up and sophisticated for an 11-year-old. But anyway, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And that was my first proper fragrance. And just owning it made me think, okay, now I need to know about fragrances because I own this thing, and it was almost as though I'd been kind of given this responsibility that I now had to know.
Did you start wearing it young at school as well?
Yeah. I mean, they must have thought I was crackers, It's a really... you have to be woman enough to wear that fragrance. I think it's a grown-up... I mean, it's quite buttoned up. It's not sexy. It's quite a kind of buttoned up, prim sort of a fragrance, but it's very sophisticated and it's very grown-up, I think. Quite a retro fragrance.
You've written a lot. You've won awards for pieces you've written about, specifically about Chanel No. 5, which I can imagine back then was a very big deal because there are so many fragrances in the landscape today. Everything feels a little bit sort of less special, but at that time, that fragrance was so momentous for you. What are your earliest memories of that, and how did it sort of enter your life?
So after Miss Dior came a kind of flurry of fragrances that everyone at school wore. So Benetton colours, Next Floribunda, does anybody remember that? White Musc from the Body Shop, all of that stuff. And I kind of wore those, although I do feel a great deal of affection for those fragrances. I mainly wore them because that's what you did, right? That's just what you did. And the first fragrance that I really fell in love with outside of the Miss Dior I'd been given and knew I had to have, despite it being not remotely anything to do with being a teenager in South Wales, was Chanel No. 5. So there is a huge Boots in Cardiff that's more like a department store. It's absolutely massive. And in those days, Carol Alt used to be the model. And then Inés de la Fressange came a little bit later. And these kind of cards were in Boots in Cardiff of her holding the flacon of No. 5 or whatever. And it was sort of on its own kind of plinth, podium type thing. And I was obsessed with fashion and captivated by the images. And there was a tester. And so I was walking through Boots one weekend and I picked up the tester and I sprayed it. And I just had to have it. I became consumed by the idea of acquiring this fragrance. I think it would have been the Eau de Toilette, which is still my favourite No. 5, I think. I mean, I love them all, but I think Eau de Toilette's my personal favourite because it's got a slightly kind of more masculine, medicinal sort of quality to it. Lots of booze, And I think that would have been the one I wanted. And I just became obsessed with it. And I saved and saved and saved and saved until I could have the Eau de Toilette. And I'm not exaggerating when I say it's the longest relationship of my life. I have never stopped wearing it. It is my go-to when I need to feel utterly like myself. So I wore it to my first wedding. I'd been married twice, felt wrong to wear it twice. I wore it to my first wedding. I wore it to my father's funeral. I didn't wear it to my mother's funeral. I wore her fragrance, which I know we'll come back to. I was wearing it when I lost my virginity. I wore it to acid house clubs. I wore it to school discos. It is the one for me, which is not to say I've even worn it this year, but never will a year pass without me wearing it a couple of times.
So interesting, because usually or often a fragrance is a very specific time capsule for a moment, but almost this fragrance has been the moments actually are insignificant. The fragrance overrides all of those. It doesn't make you think, oh God, this makes me think of my first wedding. That's not a memory you want to keep.
No, that's a really good point. It makes me think of me.
Yes.
I think of it as, and I've written this before, but I think of number 5 as my backbone in a bottle.
Yeah.
It's like if I just need to feel absolutely like myself and familiar and not be worrying about anything, I reach for number 5 because it's mine. It's my smell. And there have been, which is not to say I don't love that it was there during those milestone moments. And there have been lots of weird times where number 5 has been present where I've thought, of course, I was wearing number 5 when that happened.
Yep.
And I'm not prone to superstition, but it has been a very significant fragrance to me. And it's funny with number 5, I sort of take the view with perfume, like with lots of things. Look, if you don't like it, you don't like it. That's completely fine. But I cannot bear when people slag off number 5. Yeah. It's like those annoying people who go, oh, I hate the Beatles, they're really overrated. It's like, no, you're allowed to not like the Beatles, but you're not allowed to say they're overrated because they are objectively brilliant. And number 5 is objectively brilliant. And you don't have to like it, but you do have to respect it.
So, I completely agree. It's a bit like the conversation we have about La Mer. It's like, don't diss it.
Love La Mer.
Read the science.
Yeah.
There's another Chanel fragrance which we're going to all smell because I did think, oh, shall I bring a bottle of number 5 and we'll smell that? But actually, I think this fragrance, I always associate it with you a little bit more, actually. Tell us about why there is a bottle of Coco Eau de Parfum, specifically, not Coco Mademoiselle, on this table, because this is a really big one for you, isn't it? And we're going to pass around some blotters so you can all experience it. Great. While Sally chats about this one.
So Coco is the most underrated Chanel fragrance, in my opinion. Coco Mademoiselle is Britain's, I think, still Britain's best-selling luxury fragrance. Yeah. I mean, Coco Mademoiselle is a perfectly nice fragrance. I have nothing against it, but it is not Coco, and it isn't really related to Coco so much for me. So I love this fragrance. To me, it's like a kind of Coca-Cola reduction.
Yes.
With kind of vanilla bourbon, vanilla bourbon and Coca-Cola.
Yep.
It's so amazing.
Like that syrupy Coca-Cola
and
from a gun.
Really, like soft and grown up and sophisticated. And I didn't start wearing it until so I'm 50 now. I didn't start wearing Coco till I was about 35. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is my mother wore Coco, and so I didn't really feel it belonged to me. I felt it belonged to her.
Yep.
And also my mother and I had a really bad relationship, and I saw it was just too conflicting, but I always really loved it. But the other thing about Coco, and the other reason I didn't wear it, is I do think you have to be a woman. Mm-hmm. I think you have to be a grown-up. It's not for kids.
When you wear it now, presumably you don't necessarily think of your mother wearing it.
No,
so
I
how
don't.
do you... What state of mind are you in where you wear this fragrance? Give me a scenario where it calls for some Coco.
So I wear Coco a lot at work dinners because it feels posh, it feels dressy, it feels sexy but not slutty.
Nice. Yeah.
And I love a slutty fragrance, I really do, but there are times and places. It feels appropriate, it feels respectful, it feels smart. Mm-hmm. It's soft, it's inviting, it's not a cruel chypre, it's just, and I find as I've got older, I was always a chypre girl, but as I've got older, I also equally now love the artist formerly known as an Oriental. I know, I now love an opulent,
decadent, amberesque.
An opulent,
yes, we call it that, yeah.
Sort of a fragrance. And Coco is sort of the epitome of that for me. So I wear it a lot to those things. I wore it to my second wedding.
There you go, yep.
And not many people know that. People ask me about that all the time on Instagram, and I never say because I don't want to put it out there. But we're all friends.
Don't tell anyone. It's a secret.
So I wore it to my second wedding. I wore it the other night to Fragrance Foundation Awards.
Yep.
But I wore Fredric Malle Musc Ravager as well, just in case somebody in Ipswich couldn't smell me. I thought I'd just go for the double. I'm not one for a floral. I typically want something soft and velvety. I'm not usually one for freshness unless it's kind of mossy. So I just find this so kind of velveteen and soft and boozy and sexy and feminine.
Delicious.
It makes me feel really grown up. I feel like Coco is one of those fragrances where you feel like you've earned it.
Yep. I totally understand that. And actually, you've used words that are very textural and visual, and you can taste them. It's so bloody good, isn't it? And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about your fragrance writing because
it's also a bit shoulder paddy, isn't it?
It's a bit of
an 80s power fragrance.
Joan would approve.
Exactly. Sorry.
I want to talk about your fragrance writing because you didn't necessarily start out in fragrance writing. You've written about everything from rock music to skincare. I mean, obviously, you know that Sally is a beauty industry luminary, and you've written books about all sorts of types of beauty product. But can you take me back to how you first got into writing about fragrance? Because it was a bit of an accident, wasn't it?
Yes. So I was a fashion journalist, and I persuaded my editor to allow me to start a grooming section. So I started to be invited to men's grooming events. And a couple of things happened at roughly the same time. I was invited to my first men's fragrance launch, which I think was Clinique Happy for Men. My husband and I were Googling today to try and get the chronology right, but I think it was Clinique Happy for Men. And round about the same time, I was commissioned by Attitude magazine to interview Roger Dove.
Yeah.
So I went to see Roger Dove, who at that time was at Guerlain, and he was, I think he had some, you know, it was a kind of made-up title because he's a unique character. I think it was a Professor Parfum or something.
Professeur de Parfum, yeah.
And so I went to Guerlain to interview him, and obviously part of the interview was he was showing me fragrances, and he said something encouraging, you know, like, oh, you seem to love this, or you seem to really get this, or, you know, he said something nice about it. And he said, would you like to come on my fragrance training? And I said, yes, I bloody would. So I went back maybe a month, 2 months later to Guerlain, and I did a day's, or maybe it was 2 days, don't remember, this was in the late 90s, fragrance training. And I fell in love at that training. I fell in love with lots of things. I fell in love with talking about perfume, writing about perfume, and I fell in love with Guerlain Mitsuko, which I then wore for many years, almost exclusively.
Yep.
And then after that, I started writing about fragrance, and I won a Jasmine Award quite quickly. And because I'd won a Jasmine Award, I then started being invited by PRs to women's launches and events. And so suddenly I was on the mailing list for all the women's fragrances as well.
Something like that, winning an award, if you're a freelance writer, not necessarily attached to a magazine or publication. So the Jasmine Awards is something that, and we'll get back to the one that you won last week as well, so congratulations on that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the Fragrance Foundation is this incredible industry sort of leading hub that puts on these award ceremonies every year, so perfumes can win, but also journalists and content creators, and the Jasmine Awards has been something that's been going on for many years now. And if you are even nominated for a Jasmine, and especially if you win one, it can be quite career. The tectonic plates can shift because brands recognize you as somebody who can capture fragrance concepts in writing. You can describe fragrances, and that for brands is catnip. And there are a lot of editors, and we know quite a few, who absolutely hate writing about fragrance because it's hard. And that happened quite a lot to you, didn't it?
This is very significant. this fact is very significant. So most beauty journalists hate writing about fragrance, and most editors hate writing about fragrance because it's hard. It's really hard because you're not describing ingredients, because it's basically alcohol. It's alcohol and oils, right? You're not really describing fragrance if you're doing it interestingly, I would argue. You know, you're not describing the ingredients. And so it's not like skincare, and you're not really describing the science, although sometimes you are if it's specifically about that. You're describing air. Like, it's really hard. And so if you love it and if you can do it, editors jump on you and you get work. And so what happened was, when I won my first Jasmine, it was in a hotel, and after the ceremony, various editors came up to me and said, "Oh, we read that piece, that was great, would you like to write for us?" And off the back of that first Jasmine Award, I went freelance, and I've basically been freelance ever since. I've had a couple of stints. I worked at The Face for a while, I worked at Elle Girl for a while, I edited that, but mainly I've been freelance since that first Jasmine Award, and that was in the 90s.
That's mad, isn't it?
And it was because of that I have never been out of work. I mean, well, that's what kick-started it, and then I won another one the next year, and it kind of, and it sort of rolled on. But I like that not everyone can do it.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? We're
Yay
just
for
a weird
us.
little geeky club of people who really like doing it.
Yeah.
And with the writing, and as well as presenting, because you have a podcast, you have your social media, speaking and writing can also sort of, meld together. Can you take me through your brain journey, your editorial brain journey, when you smell a really sort of big new launch that you've been looking forward to smelling? When something lands in front of you and you've sprayed it on a blotter or your skin, how does your brain go? Where does it go?
I think my response as a customer is the same as of a writer. I immediately start kind of writing about it, I think, in my head. I think the way I write about it is quite specific, which is not the same as unique, but it's specific in that I really hated the way fragrance was written about by magazines and newspapers when I became a journalist. I actually hated the way beauty was written about, which is not to say that there weren't brilliant beauty writers, because there were, but the way editors and publishers insisted that they wrote, I hated it. And when I first went to The Guardian, and I spoke to my editor, who I respect enormously, Maripi, she's amazing, she's really, really great, but I gave it to her straight. I was like, I just don't understand why you're covering beauty in a completely different way to literally every other topic in the newspaper. The women who are going to read beauty are also reading politics and are also reading about food and lifestyle issues and fashion and sport and all that stuff. So why is it written in this kind of weird way? Mm-hmm. It's the same as any other journalism. You need a beginning, a middle, and an end. You need some stylistic flourishes. You need some jokes. You need some facts. You need some opinions. It's like, why it had to be written in this really dry way was really aggravating to me. This was really true of perfume, because the bloody pyramid, I hate the pyramid, because I just think it doesn't really tell you anything. And also for me, in more direct response to your question, I just want to know how it's going to make me feel. I don't care what the base note is. The base note will be probably obvious to you. And the rest is a bit of PR bollocks, very often. And the rest is the magic of it. That's what's brilliant to it. How does it make you feel? Like, who would play it in a film?
Yeah.
What outfit would it wear? Who would its best friend be? What would its hobbies be? Like, all of these things are more helpful, I think,
completely,
in letting you know what you want to wear. And that was all I was ever interested in. There were sometimes arguments, there were things taken out of pieces. I said that Chanel Coco Noir smelt like a rich lady's knickers, and they took it out. And I said, no, women will know what I mean. Yes. And it's like, there's this thing with fragrance in particular, but also all of beauty, where people get blinded by the science.
Yeah.
But actually, with fragrance in particular, if you feel it, you are right. Mm-hmm. If you think you can smell raspberries, then you can. You can smell raspberries. And if you can smell box fresh sneakers walking through an old church, that's what you can smell. And you are not wrong. And I think fragrance writing has to be friendly and warm and evocative, because I want people to think they can write about fragrance. And I think the reason people think they can't write about fragrance is because they are blinded by the science and not following their heart and not having confidence in their nose.
And that is the overwhelming feedback and comments that you get on your social media and in your from your articles and your books, that you're speaking a language that people can understand, and it's not a secret, exclusive members club handshake that sounds, I mean, who the hell knows what vetiver smells like? Sorry.
Actually smells quite nasty, vetiver in its raw form.
Yeah. I mean, if I said potato sacks and dried grass, that's a bit more understandable,
exactly.
Right? So those are the words that actually real people understand. It's like the recipe of a cake. If I said, well, it's got baking soda in it, I mean, what? That makes no sense. So fragrance is so different to, let's say, makeup or skincare, which is very much about performance and facts and results. And I think that's probably why so many people find it so difficult, because they have to be creative and illustrative in their thinking about it.
Well, I always say, because obviously I write across category, and I always say, skincare is science, makeup is art, perfume is magic. And if you feel it, then you're halfway there. And the irony of what you're talking about, the reason I write about fragrance or talk about fragrance in the way I do, very deliberately, and you do something very similar with two sides of the same coin, if not the same, is that perfume has this really kind of rarefied, untouchable, high style to it that's a bit, you can't sit with us. But actually, I think fragrance is the most democratic in all of luxury goods, because you don't need to be thin, you don't need to be young, you don't even need to be rich to smell amazing. It always fits.
Always fits,
you don't have to swap it out every season. If anyone can smell like $1 million. And so I hate the idea that that is one aspect of beauty that people feel closed off from, like they're not good enough to take part.
Totally. I want to talk a bit about the magic, because Sally and I get to see things in our industry which are quite weirdly magical. When you work on a magazine, or if you're a content person, you get invited to product launches and events and big sort of press trips where the fairy dust is scattered and you're kind of bamboozled by all this sort of marketing machine, and they want you to smell something and they set you in the scene for that. So press events can be quite funny and slightly ridiculous, but absolutely magical as well. So I'd love you to tell us about maybe some of the first fragrance events that you went to kind of set the scene on how bizarre some of these are, how incredible they are, how awful they can be as well. So I'd love you to take us through a few examples of the launches you've loved and loathed.
So the first ever trip I went on was for Thierry Mugler Cologne, which is a masterpiece, like one of my favourite fragrances. And actually, I think that was my second Jasmine Award, writing about that fragrance specifically. It's so good. They flipping discontinued it again. They renamed it Come Together. It's got a semen note in it. They renamed it Come Together, but now it's gone again. But you can find it online. It's really inexpensive. It's amazing. So that was the first trip I went on. Went to Paris. My boss got so pissed, disappeared. I was so embarrassed, so ashamed. However, Vera Struby from Thierry Mugler took us around the Thierry Mugler Couture Archive, which was one of the best days of my life. God. It was really special, unforgettable, amazing. You just saw all the catwalk pieces and the breastplates that looked like vintage cars. Oh, it was just amazing. That was one of my all-time faves, and it was my first.
Yeah, wow.
My first gig was the Smiths, and I feel a bit the same about that. My first press trip, how can that be topped? Anyway, so that was my first. I have been on other press trips where it's been a fragrance that I have hated, and everywhere I go is scented.
Yep.
And I feel like I want to be in a capsule rolled through the event, like everywhere I go. I don't want to be really rude, but there was one in particular that came out a few years ago, and I just could smell it everywhere for weeks.
Yep.
And my shoes smelled of it, and absolutely everything. So you get a few of those. I've had some magical ones with Chanel. I suppose the real highlight for me in the past few years is that I've hosted a number of press events for things I felt really excited about. So Frederic Malle, who's no longer with Frederic Malle, I would typically host him when he was in the UK, so that was always a real pleasure. And then I got to work really closely on the project for Estee Lauder Legacy Collection, the Frederic Malle project, that was really special. But by far and away, the most special moment, the most emotional fragrance moment of my career was hosting the 100th anniversary for number 5. Because it was a funny one, that. So I had won another Jasmine writing about number 5.
Yeah.
And Chanel knew about that. And then when I had been writing Pretty Iconic, which was a book about iconic beauty products, many of which were fragrances, but not all, obviously number 5 had to go in. And Chanel, in the most French, like bonkersly French way, said, "Why don't you write that chapter in Mademoiselle Chanel's apartment?" Like,
casual,
I mean, it's so French, it's so over the top, you know.
But it's so them, though.
It's so them.
It's a machine. Chanel is enormous.
Yeah.
But they operate in quite an artisanal, private, special way. They don't just want you to write about it. Come and sit on her sofa, and then you'll feel her spirit in you whilst you write it, because we want you to live and breathe this right now. That's incredible.
I would argue that Chanel is the only heritage house in fragrances who has truly guarded its assets and not kind of lost the magic. But, I mean, that comes from being a privately owned company, I think. But, yes, so I got to host that, and we had been in lockdown, and we were coming out of lockdown, and they knew, of course, that I was a number 5 devotee, and they took me out for lunch and said, "We're turning 100. This is going to be our biggest year probably in this century. And we want you to host the celebrations with events." And I was like,
Yes, all right then. Let me check my schedule. Yeah.
I came out and I called my management company. I went, "Do not play hardball.
Do not get in between this. Yeah.
Do not." I didn't want them to kind of be sort of negotiating, because the truth is, and I said to my family at the time, like, we're a small community in fragrance. We genuinely are so happy for each other when we all get to do things, and, you know, we support one another. We genuinely are really good friends. I whooped when Susie beat me to one of the awards at Jasmine the other night. I went to one of Darish's events with Amiraj, and it was so great. And it was like, you know, we really do support each other. But if I hadn't have got that gig,
Yeah, that's it.
I
You're
would
out.
have cried,
Yeah.
and I would have wept.
I think all of us would have. How dare anyone else have this one? Yeah.
You know, I've done lots of Chanel over the years. You've obviously done lots of Chanel over the years. Joe Fairley has. We're all very happy for each other, but that one. It would have really harmed my soul if I hadn't have got it.
Yeah.
So I was thrilled to do that, and there was just something so
Full
360
circle,
about it for me, to be sitting there and actually to kind of be earning a living out of talking about a thing that I have warmth for, love for, affection for, an encyclopedic knowledge of. Just felt, I don't know, like 13-year-old me would have wet herself.
Yeah.
And that's why it was like the best thing I've ever done. And it, you know, it wasn't a big paying job, or it was nothing like that.
It doesn't matter when it's.
I didn't care. I would have paid them. I'm glad my manager didn't tell them that, but I would have paid them. But it was everything, because I would have died walking through Boots if somebody had said one day, you can teach rooms full of people about this amazing fragrance.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I think, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, some of the coolest people that we meet are the perfumers, the geeks, the sort of alchemist wizards behind the perfume, because they speak our language and they are also sort of scientists, but they're artists, they are musicians, they're amazing people. Tell me a little bit about some of the perfumers that you've loved talking to and interviewing and meeting over the years.
So I've interviewed a lot
all
perfumers.
of them, I think, yeah.
Some are brilliant at being interviewed. It's not the case that the better the perfumer, the more interesting they are. Just some are better at talking than others. Jean-Claude Ellena doesn't talk so much because he talks through fragrance, I think, more, and he's my favourite perfumer alive. And so, but the ones who can talk are absolutely fascinating. So Olivier Polge is very, very good to interview. He's really interesting. He's opinionated, but he's warm, he's kind. So Olivier Polge at Chanel, but let's not keep talking about Chanel. Thierry Vasser I've interviewed a lot from Guerlain. He is really charismatic, opinionated. He's very generous in his...
naughty as well.
He's naughty. Yes,
like
he's naughty.
Perfumer.
Also, when I have hosted him, all my friends, male and female, have fancied him. He's quite a sexy man, isn't he?
Yeah.
Perfumers, in my experience, are very they have a lust for life. Perfumers, they love wine, and they love food, and they often love cigarettes, and they love and sex, and they want all of life. They're hedonists. I've interviewed Francis Curtijan a few times. He's really great. He's I'd be lying if I said I love his fragrances. I think he's a very good perfumer and a great person to talk to. There's something about his fragrances that usually doesn't speak to me. But as an interview, he's fabulous, and he loves Madonna, so that's enough for me. I've interviewed most of the main ones, I think. Christine Nagel is amazing, so intelligent and chic and thoughtful in her approach to fragrances. I love Lynn Harris. Lynn Harris is so low-key.
Actually, I want to talk a little bit more about Lynn, because I feel like maybe her brand is sort of perfect for this situation, the Barnes Fragrance Fair, which is all about craftsmanship and artistry and slow process and beautiful, inspiring stories. And she's traditionally trained, and she's a British woman perfumer, which is a very rare thing. I think it's just her and Ruth Mastenbrock who are trained in Grasse over the millions of years.
She's the real deal,
Real deal. There's a perfume, actually, that we're all going to smell called Rainwood, which I know is one of your ultimate faves. As we're passing blotters around, and this is a perfume by Lynn's own brand called Perfumer H. Now, Lynn is one of these incredible perfumers who works with big houses, small houses. She does the fragrances for Bamford, for instance.
Sam McKnight Hair.
Sam McKnight Hair.
Which is the best-smelling hair care in the world.
She did Richard E. Grant's fragrances for Jack Perfume. She's done Sunspell.
She did all of
beautiful.
The Sunspells.
And this is her own brand, where she's taken an ingredient, a concept. It could be clouds, it could be hay, it could be any sort of ingredient that you think, that doesn't sound very beautiful to smell, and she makes it smell magical. So
I think, based on the fragrances we've talked about so far, talked about my loving so far, this is a surprise.
This is a surprise, because it's, tell me about how you felt about this. When did you first meet it?
So I was with Lynn, and I was at her boutique in Chiltern Street. And I was just with her and just kind of hanging out, really, in the shop. I've got two sides to my perfume choices. I mean, I have lots of others as well, but there are two kind of main sides. When I go to work, I am fairly like smart, and I have makeup on, and I go to dinners and present events and things like that. And for that, I would never wear this, right? Yeah. I would wear some of the others we've talked about. Yeah. But on the weekend, I basically do nothing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I will work, but I'll work at home. I just hang out with my husband, really, and like have a takeaway on a Friday night and don't wear makeup unless I'm making a video or I'm wearing jeans, comfies, whatever. And these sorts of fragrances are what I love. Sort of very British, quite herbaceous. Mm. And Lynn Harris does a thing better, I think, than any other perfumer, is wetness.
Yes.
She's like amazing at wetness.
Yeah.
And so many of her fragrances have that in common. It's kind of Angelica, and she's the only person where I really love her use of lavender. I'm not one for lavender. I like English lavender, but I'm not keen on French lavender. I like that slightly synthetic Yardley lavender smell, but I don't like that kind of feel. Anyway, she uses lavender really well. But she has this dewiness, this
dampness,
dampness, damp wood, damp kind of seaweed. I love that thing she does. And this, by the way, this is very expensive because it's from her own brand. However, she made one for Sunspell, which I wrote the materials for, and it is called Sea Moss, and it is very similar to this. And the bottle is 3 times the size.
Yeah.
It's like it's something like 100 mils, I think, for 100 quid or something like that. Anyway, it's amazing. Sea Moss is fantastic, and I could have chosen that too. It's really beautiful. All of her Sunspell fragrances are beautiful.
Gorgeous, yeah.
But anyway, this, it gives me sort of blustery British seaside.
Yeah, and that's where you live as well, isn't it?
I live in Brighton, so maybe
like
that's
home.
why. But I love that sense of wetness about it. I love the total lack of sweetness.
Yeah.
I don't like sweet food very much. Mm-hmm. I'm not a pudding person. I'd always rather have 2 starters.
And cheese.
And cheese. Not really a pudding person. I don't like sweet fragrances. As you can imagine, the last 5 years have been hell for me. I'm so distressed by the fact that everything smells like a pudding trolley at the moment. I hate it. And what Lynn Harris does is kind of never that. It's always devoid of sweetness. It's always elegant, but it's not harsh. I mean, I keep picking it up and sniffing it. I wear it loads, Sea Moss. Wear it a lot.
Those forever fragrances on your mantelpiece, I mean, I remember you did a video on that years ago, which is what spurred you on to do more content on your fragrances. There's another one that I want to talk about, which is another forever fragrance. It's called L'Amandière by a brand called Heeley, and I was introduced to this fragrance watching one of your videos, and it is utterly beautiful. We'll pass around some blotters of that.
This is one of my all-time most worn fragrances.
And that, to say that from all the fragrances that we get sent, to have those forever favourites on your mantelpiece is a big deal. What makes this one stay on that mantelpiece? What makes it a forever?
So this came to me via PR. PR is very, very important in our job. I get a bit hacked off sometimes when sort of people on social media say, well, if you didn't buy it, it's bias, as though buying something isn't a total act of bias, right? Especially in fragrance. And so because of the jobs we do, I constantly get to try fragrances I would not be drawn to, that I would not be drawn to their image, their description, their retailer or whatever. And L'Amandière was one of those. The PR, who at the time was Jason at Up, he and I...
Hello, Jason.
He and I were having lunch. This must have been, 10 years ago. And he said, oh, I've got this lovely fragrance. And I just swooned. And I must say, I like the extract the best. They've discontinued it. Please start a petition. But it's got this sort of melancholic, gentle wateriness.
It's quite wet.
It's
as well.
quite
It's still
wet again, but it's a bit teardropsy wet. It's a bit kind of. It's got that après lundi thing.
Yes, that we love. Yeah,
that's kind of melancholic, but in its own. It feels very intimate, very personal. Again, because I don't like sweet things, I like the fact that the almonds are unripened. There's a greenness about the almonds. It's not marzipan.
It's not marzipan. It's done standing under the almond tree after it's been raining.
Exactly.
And it's the whole moment there.
It's wet, unripened, untoasted.
And it lasts hours.
It really hangs around.
It really does, yeah.
But it's really unobtrusive. It's very clever when people do that. I find Jean-Claude Eleanor's very good at that. Fragrances that are very subtle but prolific, you know, they keep going throughout the day. They have longevity without ever crossing into screechy. And this is one of those. It is so appropriate for anything.
Yeah.
It's not particularly sexy, just like the Lynn Harris one, I suppose, is not particularly sexy unless you're kind of with your partner and in jumpers and, you know, that's a different kind of thing. But it's not overtly sexy. However, I do feel I can wear it in the evening, and if I've been out all day, I feel like I can reapply and I feel a bit more dressed up.
Yeah.
It's a lovely base for other things.
Yep.
I think Heeley is such a brilliant brand. There was, when Heeley first came out, when I think Jason first showed it to me as a brand, which, like I say, 10, 12 years ago maybe, there were loads of rich boys starting perfume brands, weren't there?
Yeah.
I mean, there were loads of like boys on a trust fund who were like, oh, I'll make perfume. And you got shown these perfumes, like, and why is that £250 exactly? Yep. You know, and these kind of rich New York boys. And James Heeley had started Heeley, and I think I could have kind of gone, oh, another one of those. But actually, it's so thoughtful. It's so beautifully done. It's very understated. I think it has integrity as a brand. There are loads of good ones within Heeley. But this, I cannot believe a fragrance that I have only known for about 12 years has been worn probably as often as number 5.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. If you love things like L'Eau d'Hiver,
yes, yeah,
Après Lundi, lots of Lynn Harris's stuff, that kind of, you know, teardrops and raindrops.
Yeah, like watercolour perfumes.
It's, yeah, tinted moisturiser.
Beautiful.
I just think it's so elegant. It's beautiful.
We're going to have a little perfume pause because something I really want to ask you about, Sally, is the charity that you co-founded, Beauty Banks, who are the partners of Barnes Fragrance Fair, and actually in your beautiful KGA, Kenneth Green Associates, little goodie bags, there's a little flyer with a QR code, and you can learn a bit more about that. But whilst we take a sort of a nose break, could you explain to us what the thinking is behind Beauty Banks, almost an explanation of what the charity is and why you started it with your co-founder, Jo Jones?
I was filming a documentary for BBC Wales on homelessness in Cardiff. I had been homeless as a teenager. They had asked me to make this piece for BBC Wales. I went to Cardiff to film. We were filming in a homeless shelter. The biggest homeless shelter in Cardiff is called the Haggard Centre. The Haggard Centre is chaotic. It's quite a dangerous place. They typically don't allow young homeless people to go there because it's a lot. And while the camera crew was setting up, they had to lock me in reception for my own safety. And I was sitting in reception and I looked under the desk and there was a cardboard box, maybe 2 small cardboard boxes under the desk, and they had like tampons, single tampons, disposable toothbrushes that you might get on a plane, shower gels you might clear out of a premiere in, you know, that kind of thing, and Bic razors, things like that. And the woman behind reception, I said, oh, what's all that for? And she said, oh, well, if one of our clients has a housing meeting or a social services meeting or a job interview or just has her period, we give them these items that they need. And I said, where do they come from? And she said, well, we just bring them in and we tell our friends that if they go to a hotel or if they're on a flight, can they bring us some minis? Because obviously homeless people need minis because they're often traveling with a very, a backpack or whatever. And I just thought, well, this is ridiculous because I work in an industry where there is so much product, so much waste. And Joe and I had been moaning a lot about various things within the industry, lots of it around waste. And so I took a picture of the cardboard box and I sent the photo to Joe and said, I reckon we can do something about this. And she went, yeah, and then we could give them the product, then people could take them. It's like food banks, isn't it? But with beauty banks. I went, yeah, that's it. So I wrote a column about it 2 days later for the Pool. And within a week, we'd been in every broadsheet. We'd been on the telly. We were being followed around by a film crew from America. It was bonkers. And we accidentally founded a charity. And we registered maybe 6 months after we started. And yeah, now we have like a team of staff. And the way we work is we give essential hygiene products to registered charities. So we are a C2C charity, and we provide toiletries to over 1,500 charities in the UK.
That is amazing. And and if somebody was thinking of, rather than getting a coffee later, what can someone do? You can scan the QR code and do a little donation. Because how does a money donation help? Oh my God, okay, so this is the other thing. So we can tell you where all your money goes. Yeah. Like, we have the receipts. We are so meticulous about it. Obviously, I don't draw a salary. Joe doesn't draw a salary. We have 25 volunteers. We obviously have 3 core paid members of staff. But most of the product we get is free because we just beg. I just exploit my relationships, basically, and so does Joe. Yeah,
most of the product we get is free, but where we desperately need money is in getting it out. Yeah. Right, getting it to people. And so if you go into our website, there is a text donation code, or I didn't know about the QR code. Very well done, thank you. Basically, all your money will go to getting these things out to charities, because we're very lucky. We have amazing corporate partners. So Estee Lauder, for example, Estee Lauder Companies pays for an entire member of staff and then some. So the great thing about things like that, Babyliss give us 1% of all their sales. Amazing. So the brilliant thing about that is that it lets you know that what you donate doesn't go on, printer paper. It goes out into the field. And so everything you give us will be used so wisely, and the difference it makes is unbelievable. And I know, essentially most of what we do is essential toiletries. So people who, basically everything you use when you wake up in the morning, toothbrush, toothpaste, shower gel, deodorant, all that stuff, lots of people have to choose between eating or keeping clean. And obviously they choose eating because that's how we're wired. And so to restore that dignity of being able to keep clean means that kids go to school. We supply to lots of schools. Kids who are embarrassed to go to school, go to school. Kids who don't form friendships because they're being teased, form friendships. People who can't go to job interviews get jobs. Like, the real life impact of these things is huge, just from essential toiletries, but also we should just really briefly touch on fragrance. Joe Malone, for the past few Christmases, have given us hundreds of bottles of Joe Malone fragrance that we have given to women who have fled violence at home and have run away with nothing. And they've arrived at a shelter with their kids, with the bag they were able to sneak out the night before. And they have nothing. And actually, to get a Joe Malone fragrance... Yeah. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? It's such a brilliant thing to be able to do for people. It's amazing. And so you will be doing that for people if you make a donation.
The seismic effect on that emotionally is huge.
Massive. Massive.
Thank you for taking us through that. I want to come back to the Jasmine Awards, which is what we were talking about earlier on. And Sally, you won a Jasmine Award last week. Can you imagine it? Can you believe it was just last week?
I mean, I've been in America since
That's
then.
That's mad, isn't it? Anyway, congratulations, because it was a brilliant, brilliant piece. And I'd love you to talk about what topic that was on, because it's very fitting for today. We've had a lot of conversation around this particular topic. So can you tell everyone what the piece was about?
It was about teenagers. So I have 2 teenage sons. One is 19 and the other one is 17. So my 19-year-old's turning 20 next week, and my 17-year-old's going to be 18 in September. When my soon-to-be 18-year-old was about 12, he saw a fragrance, which I won't name because there's nothing really wrong with the fragrance. He saw a fragrance in my office and said, "Mum, can I have this?" And I was like, "Yes." And he was like, "I really like it." It stank. Like, it was awful. My husband and I, even my other son, we all hated this fragrance. And he was like dousing on. It was awful. But I couldn't tell him because he was so excited by it and he loved it. And I wanted to encourage his love of fragrance. I didn't want to like rain on his parade, basically, even though I was gagging. And so I decided that the only thing I could do was replace it somehow. Yeah. And so I booked him an appointment at Jo Malone. And I reasoned that there's nothing in Jo Malone that's going to ruin your life, right?
That will ruin your life. Yeah,
ruin my life.
Yeah.
You know, you might like some Jo Malone more than others or whatever. There's nothing Jo Malone makes that's going to ruin your life. Yeah. It's like totally unobtrusive, friendly fragrances. And so I took him for an appointment at Jo Malone. They were unbelievable. I cannot recommend this enough. I have since done it for my goddaughter, to both goddaughters, a friend and his son for Father's Day, multiple girlfriends. It is the best service for somebody who thinks they don't like perfume or doesn't understand perfume. Because what it does is, it doesn't bamboozle you with jargon, but at the same time, it's not patronizing, it's respectful. You get a glass of champagne, or in his case, he had like a Diet Coke and a chocolate or whatever it was. And they didn't patronize him at all, but they didn't overwhelm him. It is the best present you can give a teenager as a coming of age, post GCSEs, or it's free. Obviously, you'll probably want to buy the perfume at the end, so you have to factor that in, but the appointment's free. And that is what I wrote the column about, because I had always heard about this kind of very romantic idea of girls, when they left school in Paris, were taken to Guerlain on the Champs-Élysées, that amazing boutique, to find their signature perfume. And I thought, well, you know, my first perfume came from a P&O ferry, but like, it's not very romantic. What can we do as British people that's adjacent to that kind of magic? And the Jo Malone experience is amazing for teenagers. I really recommend it. I don't know how many people I've arranged it for now. Yeah. And not through work, just as a kind of, birthday present. So that was what the column was about. Fragrances that teenagers can wear that won't ruin your life. Yeah, that won't ruin your life. I love that. And he's now got, my son, the same son has now got about 35 fragrances. Of him, almost as many as Freddie over there, who was part of the... Anyway, long story. But I'm going to open it up to questions in a minute. But I just want to get... when you write and when you speak and present, your advice for just real people going out shopping is always so helpful. Obviously, the fair has finished now, and it was quite overwhelming. There were a lot of people in that room. And I think overwhelming is a word that we see come up a huge amount in people who are almost sort of bamboozled by these aisles and these department stores. And there's so much, there's too much at the moment. So do you have any advice on somebody who's probably not found a fragrance that works for them yet? And if they're going out, where to go, what time of the day, any advice? I mean, one bit of advice I have is take a pen, because if you write down a blotter and then always you remember it, if you don't, then you're really screwed, because you'll love something. We've all done that, yep. Look, it's tempting to say, go to a small retailer, go to a kind of specialist retailer like Les Senteurs, which is obviously glorious and amazing. But most people don't live in London, right? And they just have Boots or department store, whatever. I would say that the most helpful thing is to deal with a consultant who only sells fragrance. Because I love a beauty consultant on a beauty counter for other things, but very often the makeup artist or the skincare expert on a beauty counter has been told to try and sell a fragrance with her sale, which is not the same thing as somebody who has done all the fragrance training, who is interacting with customers going, oh, I don't like that, oh, I love that, every day. If you can find someone in Boots or in House of Fraser or, you know, whatever your John Lewis, whatever it is, somebody who just sells fragrance, I think you're halfway there. And I would go on a quiet day, not on a Saturday, where they will be delighted to have a moment or three with you to go through fragrances. And the other thing, try to be confident. Don't feel like you have to know about fragrance. If you love it, then it's right. Yep. And if you don't love it, it's not right. Don't think about what everyone else is telling you is amazing or is telling, you know, what adverts look amazing or whatever. Just, if you love it, it's the right thing. I never care about the label of my fragrance. Yep. If I love it, I love it.
Exactly.
You know.
We're going to wrap up now, but if there are any questions, we'll make it quick because I've been told that we're all going to be thrown out or will go up in flames because we're in church. Thank you. Yes, you've got a question. We've got a little roving microphone as well, so we can all hear you.
I hate the two Fs, fragrance free. What fragrance in makeup do you just adore?
This is like the best question ever.
Such a great question. That's a whole other talk, isn't it?
I mean, I have really long conversations with people about this where I think they zone out, so I'm so glad you actually want to know. I love the smell of a Dior lipstick, that old inside of an old lady's handbag, Parma Violet sort of smell. Love that smell. The YSL Synthetic Peach lipstick fragrance, I really, really love that. The Hermes powders smell really terrific. I love the smell of a MAC lipstick, that Play-Doh.
Yes,
delicious. I like Play-Doh a lot as a smell generally. What else do I love?
Guerlain terracotta palette.
Guerlain terracotta palette.
Delicious.
Smells really fantastic. I love, I really like it in a lipstick in particular. I'm very disappointed if a lipstick is fragrance-free. I want to have a moment. When I want to have a waft. Also, I don't know if you're familiar with the Frederic Malle fragrance lipstick Rose. It's really fun. It's really fun. It just makes you smile as soon as you smell it. It's a fragrance that just smells of old lipstick. So I think you'd probably like that. I think you should check it out.
A really greasy bullet.
Really greasy bullet of red lipstick. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh. I mean, it's a great smell, isn't it, that?
We've got Freddie. Freddie, what's your question?
Well, if you take like generic women's fragrance or like feminine leaning fragrance, it's nice to see some more like niche ones that don't just smell like white florals, musk and like powder, because I feel like that's like what like Paco Rabanne and like what all the designers women's fragrances are doing. So it's nice to see some like other ones that aren't just like that pretty much. That's what I've got to say.
Yeah. Aww. Nice, thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, we
honestly,
appreciate you.
Freddie, some months I would kill for a powdery musk in this climate, honestly.
Yes.
I mean, I just cannot take any more sugar, seriously. Praline, no.
Exactly. We'll have one more question, thank you. Okay, don't worry.
What fragrance did you choose to wear today?
So I came from America, from Heathrow to Brighton, dumped my suitcase, had a quick bath, did my makeup in the car, and just as we were on our way out, my husband said, what fragrance are you going to wear to the Barnes Fragrance Festival? I was like, shit! I hadn't thought about it at all. So I just opened the cupboard. We had to leave. So I just opened the cupboard and I grabbed Debaser by DS and Durga.
Nice.
Because it felt kind of summery, and it's fig. It's what I think of as like an urban fig. It's like fig on a pavement, on a city pavement.
Yes, it's not the sort of green, juicy, sun-warmed. It's
a bit kind of chemical and synthetic in a way that I enjoy.
Yeah, nice, love that.
Yeah.
A few little thank yous to Maximise for the blotters, which are very, very handy, and to KGA again for this gorgeous goodie bag.
Can we not have a show of hands on which one they like best? Because I would like to know.
Nice. Okay, let's do show of hands, Chanel Coco.
As your fave.
Okay, interesting. And then we smelt Perfumer H. Rainwood. All right.
Oh, it's quite a lot of love for Rainwood.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, my husband's saying Rainwood.
And then, oh, hi, Dan. And then finally, Heeley L'Amandiere. This is my bottle. If anyone takes it, I will find you and hunt you down.
I feel like Heeley's taken it there, but Lynn close behind.
Lynn, very close behind. Thank you. That was so fun. We could do this for hours, couldn't we?
I mean, we
do actually do it for hours, usually over a lot of wine and crisps.
We do this a lot, yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us all. I hope you've had a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice du Parcq, and thank you for supporting Beauty Banks in advance. Please, please, please.